Everybody come to this row, and if this row gets full, then this row. Let's try to fill it. One of these is fine. That way you guys can sit there, and I can sit
You guys, time so far?
Nathan, when are you required to do anything? Let's do a life lesson before we do it.
Let's teach you about the
Go to sleep.
Stop now.
I want to plug your ears.
Are we supposed to sleep after?
Listen, let me clarify something for you. There's nothing in life. Live stream. Can we live stream so that I can speak off the record?
What do you care about?
Whatever. Let's put this on the record. I get it. There's nothing in life that's required, and there's nothing in life that's truly optional. It's how you perceive. So if you're willing to face the consequences of something, if you know I do this thing, this happen, and you're like, I can handle that. You can do whatever you want. So the older you get, the more you have to find that, the more you're going to choose good things, and you're going to choose the things that not because Heb said so. Like Heb said, you have to go to bed. Yeah, but what's he gonna do? He's gonna go to bed. You're gonna go. All right. So what? Right. So if you really can go, you stay up all night. So the older you get, the less we're going to tell you what to do. The more we're going to we're still waking you up for liturgy tomorrow. If I have to drag you in by your ears, you're still coming to liturgy. So if I'm tired for liturgy and falling asleep in the deacon's room over here, dragging you out of the deacon's room over here, then by all means stay up all night. But if we're going to make a good choice, we're going to have a great retreat. A long day tomorrow. What are we learning tomorrow? What did you decide on? Learning the hymn of Homogeneity. So, is it Rogi Menos or Kismata Oath, or like what did we say when you come in? But is it Matanya or no Matanya the Greek? Nothing. So we encourage you guys to be reasonable. Like, let's enjoy the nice talk by Deacon Severus. Let's enjoy some time together. And let's go to bed at a reasonable time so we can enjoy the day together tomorrow instead of being tired tomorrow. Does that seem reasonable?
My question was...
Absolutely.
It's a long question.
Absolutely. But I'm setting the ground rules from now that
For life.
we're not, well, for life, but also we're like, please don't put us in a position where we have to be servants. Let's just hang out. Let's enjoy our time together where it's not like, oh, we have to do what the servant says. Like, just do something not ridiculous, and then you can do whatever you want. No, you can't do that. Well, liturgy tomorrow is at 9:30. Exactly. So it's going to be chill. It's going to be very nice. We're going to enjoy our time together. So let's keep it like it's just us, and it's not like servants and kids. Cool?
I just, so to recap, an outline of what we did so far, what we're going to do. So we talked about, in the first talk, about some of the spirituality of the hymns. Talked a little bit about the history of the hymns, where the hymns have come from. They're very old. The idea of praising and hymns. We talked about specifically the hymns in the Coptic Church and how these originated. Now what we want to do is take a dive into specific subset of Bescha between Bescha Week, Good Friday, Bright Saturday, Resurrection. We probably had like 80% of the hymns in the church. Sorry, what did I say? We probably have like 80% of the hymns in the church in that one period of time. So obviously we're not going to learn everything, but if we take our time and learn one hymn really good, one or two hymns really, really well, I think that you guys will benefit from it, okay? In addition to, so Deacon Severus is going to talk to us about some of the history of Bescha Week. It's evolved over time to what we now have as a finished product, and you can see, you can learn a lot by the way that it's progressed. And then we'll take a deeper dive into one of the hymns. And the reason I like this is he's going to talk to us about the theology of the hymn. And tomorrow we're actually going to learn that hymn, how to sing that hymn together as a group, both in the Coptic, and what I'd like to do is also perfect it in the English as well, so that we can sing. Because every year when we come to sing this hymn, this particular hymn, like, it's nice in the other languages as well. So we do it in Arabic and English, but not everybody knows it, and it may be sort of one person here or there. It doesn't sound as nice if we're all singing together. So that'd be the idea. If we have room to do other things tomorrow, it depends on how quickly we pick this up. If people are picking up really quickly, we may try and attack another hymn or tackle another hymn. We talked about like Eperto, like I know people want to know how to chant the psalm that's said during Bescha Week. That could be something that we could practice if we get time. But I want our focus to be just on this one particular hymn. If we learn it really well, I think we'll be good. The other thing, which we can talk about later, though, is to maybe each person here, or maybe two people or three people at a time. I haven't finalized, and I didn't talk about this with Mina either, but I think what might be a nice idea is every two or three people are sort of assigned a hymn to learn on their own. This is like homework kind of thing, to learn a hymn on your own in preparation for Bescha Week. And I mean, it would be great for everybody to know all the hymns, but recognizing that we can't do that, and recognizing that a lot of people, you can learn well on your own too. We may have each of you guys learn a couple hymns on your own, so that way you guys can learn it, and then when it comes to Bescha Week, when it's that hymn, we would, want you guys to participate in it. I don't know, did I say something wrong?
No, I wanted to add to that because one of the things that we kind of went back and forth on is, do we do lots of hymns and not have enough time, or do we do one, maybe two things, and we just focus on those? And even if we went in the direction of doing lots of hymns, we would get to like 5-10% of Holy Week. So the goal of this weekend is not for you to leave here and to be experts on Holy Week. The goal of this weekend is for you guys to leave and love Holy Week more than you did when you came. And this is something that's true of us as much as it's true of you. So it's not like, oh, we're here to teach you how to love Holy Week. No, we're here to love Holy Week together, and the more we experience it, every year we attend it, every year we prepare for it, we love it more. And I don't know if you guys know the history of this church, but when this church was started in early 80s, they didn't have any deacons. And my father-in-law was the one that was like, well, I guess someone's got to be a deacon. So he started studying the Holy Week hymns, and every year for Lent, he would learn one hymn. And he would be the only person that knew the hymn, because he's the only one that bothered to learn it. So Holy Week at St. Mark's Natick was basically my father-in-law saying whatever hymns he knew, and then other people would say with him, and every year he would learn a new one. And then I think eventually Megid Girgis came, and they served together, and they
Oh yeah, like the idea of one hymn at a time. Like, you don't have to learn all of them, but one hymn at a time. And if we may, I had talked about different ways, thought of different ways to do this. Raffle, like, everybody picks paper out that has the hymn. You're like, okay, this is what you're assigned for. Connect with the other guy that you're assigned with, and maybe you guys can learn together, hold each other accountable. Now, it's just an idea, something we can talk about, but I think the idea of learning on your own is going to be the most beneficial. And like Mina said, teaching and learning, all of us learning how to love the hymns that we learn about. I'll tell you, the majority of the hymns that I learned, believe it or not, was not from hymns class in church. We only learn so much. But at some point, we want to advance and so that we can learn. So now we're going to hear about Bescha and like I said, one of the hymns from Deacon Severus. So everybody, please pay attention, learn from him. There's a lot to learn.
So, I don't know if you know this, but I know this guy for about 20, 30 years. and he's been crazy, but I love him. I don't know why. Huh? I don't know. No, he is the same. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
No, come on. I'm not saying good. I'm saying better.
I am. All right, so. Oh, we want to continue the conversation? Oh, okay. All right, so if I was to ask, in one sentence, what is Bescha and why is it important? What would you give me? Nobody has an answer. Nobody knows what Bescha is. 6-letter word? Huh? The Passover? Okay. And why is that important? Okay. Yeah. Celebrate the passion of Christ and what saved the whole world. Very good. Very good. Any other? Yeah. You had a suggestion? You raised your finger. No. Oh, okay. Okay. If you were to define it in one sentence, why is this not working? It's basically put it this way. It is union with God that transforms mankind from death to life. That's the same exact. I just knew you were going to say that. and I chose these words very carefully and for a reason. Let's go through it again. It is union with God that transforms mankind from death to life. So 3 parts. Union with God transforms mankind from death to life. And so to really understand it, how God transforms us, we kind of step back and look at what we do and how we do things. Some people think the more you say a hymn, the more you are somehow automatically holy. Some sort of like magic potion. Sometimes people say, I don't understand anything. I'm just going to keep saying it. And I say it a lot. How many times do you say Tokte Tigom in Bescha week? A lot. And people think when you say Tokte Tigom a lot and a lot and a lot, I pray it and I feel I'm with God. Huh? Are you pointing it? And it's sometimes true. Sometimes God will eventually help you understand things with time, the more you do things. But sometimes we never get over the idea of what are we actually doing when we say Tokte Tigom? Why are we actually saying it? Okay. And when you ask somebody, why are you coming to the Bescha? Why are you saying these things? Most of the times they'll just say, that's just what we do. Okay? But they're forgetting the main point. The whole point of Bescha is union with God that transforms mankind from death to life. If you take that out, something's missing. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about why I think Bescha really kind of identifies our whole purpose in hymns or in the Christian life. Because this is really how we are supposed to approach God. The whole point of Bescha is to see God. Okay, if you come to Bescha, is it 5 times a day or 10 times a day? 10 times a day, if you come every time, and you don't see God, you didn't do anything. Right? So I think we have to start thinking a little bit, what am I supposed to be doing? And if I'm not seeing God, and if I don't understand why, what am I missing? So let me talk for a moment about C.S. Lewis. You guys know who C.S. Lewis is? Everybody knows who C.S. Lewis is? What is he famous for? Narnia. He wrote the book of Narnia. Anything else he's famous for? He wrote other books. Very good. He wrote the Screwtape Letters, very famous. He wrote one book that is genius, but very few people know it exists. It's called The Abolition of Man. Okay? Anybody, you read it? Yeah. Anybody else read it? Really genius. It's a hard book to read. I mean, you have to focus because the guy goes through some really smart things. So I'll break it down a little bit. Basically says man, as God, well, he's not talking about God, but basically saying man as God designed him has three parts: a mind, a chest, and a stomach. What's in the mind? Your brain. Brain houses the intellect. Right? What? Okay. Sure. The mind houses intellect, right? That's where you think. Okay? What does the chest house? The heart. Okay? And to put it a different way, if you use the language that the church fathers used, the heart houses the spirit. So your spirit comes from your heart. You know, if you do some biblical criticism, if you read a little bit, the number 2 word, the most used word in the Bible is what? Number 1 is God. Number 2 is heart. Heart is used 800 times in the Bible, much more than any other noun that is used. But by heart, I'll give you an example. You have to understand what the meaning is here. When he says in the Bible in Proverbs, "My son, give me your heart," does he literally mean give me your heart? Take it out of your chest? What's he mean? Follow the Spirit. Follow me through spiritually. So every time you hear heart, and it's all over the place in the Bible, it's addressing your spirit. Okay? So the mind man has a mind, man has a chest, man has a stomach. What's in the stomach? What does the stomach house? Food or instinct to eat, right? Which is kind of like desires. But if you use the language the church fathers use, it's your emotions, okay, or your carnal, your soul. Sometimes they call it, okay, not in a bad way, but sometimes it's in a good way. So every person, this is the way man was designed. You have a mind, you have a chest, you have a stomach. What happens here? C.S. Lewis wrote in the 1950s, after the Second World War, and he was facing communism and other theories that crept up. Okay? One of these theories was called relativism. Relativism means I define something by what I want. Okay? So if you have a picture and one person says that's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen in my life, and the next person right next to him looking at the same exact picture says that is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life, who's right? This theory that came around in the 50s was you're both right. Right? Sounds okay. And C.S. Lewis didn't like that. So he said, listen, if you start thinking that way, something is missing from the way man was designed. Because something is right is right. Something is wrong is wrong. It's not relative. Okay? And so he's trying to show examples of how you have to think, how man is supposed to think. So he talks about these three things. Man has a mind, chest, and stomach. So the example that you can use for mind, and this is kind of where I heard from someone else. Take, for example, Mark here is the world's most renowned historian on Abraham Lincoln. They're famous now. Okay? Knows everything about Abraham Lincoln. Wrote books and books and books about Abraham Lincoln. All right? Does he know everything about Abraham Lincoln? Nobody else knows more than him. So C.S. Lewis would start saying, and he's giving the example, but knowing something by itself is not enough, because there are people who would know more about Abraham Lincoln than the foremost scholar on Abraham Lincoln, in our case, Mark. One being his own wife, Mary Todd. Right, what's her name? Mary Todd. Mary Ann Todd. That's their name. Mary Ann, his wife, knows more about him, whatever any would. Why? Because if you look at what a wife or a husband is, a perfect man has mind, spirit, and soul. Okay? So she knows Abraham Lincoln's heart. She knows Abraham Lincoln's emotions. She knows everything. Not just the history that Mark, as a historian, knows. She knows everything. So if you approach God with just the mind, you're missing something. If you approach Bescha, knowing all the alhan, knowing all the hymns, and nothing more, you're missing something. Right? So I'll go to the Samaritan woman. You know, the gospel's coming this week. When she started talking to Jesus, and she started talking to him and said, she comes up with a point that's a little strange. She says, "Our father Jacob gave us this well and drank from it and his whole livestock, and you Jews say Jerusalem's where one ought to worship." You know that verse, right? She's making a little point. She's using a little logic here. And it's a good logic. You know, if we are to follow God, why don't we go to where God himself gave something to Jacob? Very good logic. But Jesus' answer, he could have replied, you know, with the same logic, with just the intellect. Okay? And he could have told him, well, I'll tell you why Jerusalem's better than Samaria. Because, no, he didn't do it. He didn't just give facts. He told her, you do not know what you are worshiping. You're just, even though you think you're just using your mind, you're not using spirit. And that's why he says the true worshiper of God worships in spirit and truth, right? Because he's making the point. She approached it just with the mind. He wants you to approach with mind, soul, and spirit. Anybody yet? You don't have to hit him. Okay. Ahab talked earlier about Habib Girgis. Okay. Habib Girgis did something very interesting. Archdeacon Habib Girgis. As Ahab said, he was born 1873 or so. Okay. And he was, I think, 18 years old. He gave a sermon in front of the Pope, Pope Cyril V. So that would be around 1898, 1899. So can you imagine if Pope Tawadros came to our church and he's sitting down and you gave the sermon? Think about it for a minute. That's interesting, right? But what was the sermon about? The sermon was so good that the Pope was so stricken by it, and he loved it, to the point where others actually wrote it down. That's how, this is the days before there was a recording and streaming. Some other people actually wrote it down, what he said. And he goes back to something I'm going to try and explain here. He said to them, he just starts out his sermon, and he says, "Is there anyone among us who is capable of responding to those who ask him about his religion and why he is Christian?" Is there anyone among us able to respond to those who ask about his religion and why he is Christian? I am sure that most of us do not have an answer, except to say we are born from Christian parents. If I take this to Bescha, I can say, is there anyone here who can answer why you come to Bescha? I am sure that most of us do not have an answer except to say this is just what we do every year. Is that what we do? Think about it. If that's what we're doing, we're missing something, because this goes to emotions. You can come and you can do things solely out of emotions. It's been studied that when someone comes to make a decision, they make the decision based on emotion and intellect and logic. Guess how much percentage is emotion, how much is intellect? $90 is emotion. Depends on the person. Now, studies will show, I mean, if it was Mina, 93% base their decision on emotion. 6% base it on logic. And if I go to the Old Testament, okay, in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy, God did something interesting through Moses. He said, "This day I call heavens and earth to witness against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Now choose life that your children may live." So, basically, he's saying, I'm making a covenant with you. I gave you a choice. Life or death. What are you going to pick? What should you pick? What do you pick 93% of the time? Death. We pick sin. Why do you want to hit everybody today? Okay. I choose death. So, someone who smokes. I mean, there is nobody in the world who actually believes smoking is good for you, right? It's been basically proven there's no good result from smoking. But we have a problem with smoking because everyone chooses death, right? And this is the problem. You choose by emotions, you get nowhere. So if I come to Tebescha and I say, I really felt God every time I say Tokleti Goam. Great. But that's not the whole story. There's got to be more to it. Okay? So this is where your heart comes in. And he wants us to come to Bescha spiritually. Okay? If you forget to come for the Spirit, you're missing something. Okay? So, in order to understand this, I'm going to go back to C.S. Lewis. He wrote, this is the abolition of man. People choose not to use all three, and you become something man's not. It's abolished. It's something man's not. You were designed to come and worship spirit, mind, and soul. Okay? And that's exactly why we're doing it here in Bescha, because now we are trying to see God through your heart. So I'm going to go to heart again. Talked about the Samaritan woman. She didn't have her heart. She didn't have the spirit for it. In the Beatitude, in the Sermon on the Mount, when God says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So, when you are pure in heart, you shall see God. And that is the whole purpose of what we're coming here. Right? I hope we don't come to church to see someone else. I think we try to come to see God. And in order to see God, he tells us you have to be pure in heart. What does pure in heart mean? I don't sin? Nobody. How do you understand pure in heart? What does that phrase mean? No guesses? I think I put everyone to sleep or something. What does it mean to be pure in heart? Does it mean I have no sin? Yeah. Focused on your own sins? Okay. I think he's trying to say those who want to see God have to see him with their spirit. Their heart, which we already equated, is the way to say this is your spirit. You want to see God? Your heart has to have the spirit of God. And so, to be a perfect man, or to understand how you praise, you have to praise spiritually. Okay. And if we don't do that, we're missing out. We're not the man God designed us to be. Okay, so this brings us to Bescha again. If the whole point of Adam's sin was that he destroyed the idea of what God, sin destroyed what God had planned. In other words, we were destined to be man, with mind, soul, and spirit, and always act that way. But sin came along the way and just corrupted our nature. We disintegrated, is the word the fathers use. Okay? In order to reintegrate us back to God, Christ had to come, take our nature, okay, fix what was wrong with us, teach us how to reintegrate and use these three things again so that we can be saved. Okay? That makes sense? That was the whole idea. Very, very easy. God could have just, when Adam sinned and fell, he could have just said, game over, forget it. They messed up, I don't care anymore. No. He came down, was incarnated, he took our nature, blessed our nature, taught us how to be spiritual so that we can have salvation. Okay? That's the whole point of the Bescha. We pass from life to death, from a person who is missing something in man. We're always missing something. Sin is taking away something. Usually it affects our emotions. We pick sin. We pick the wrong. We pick death. So he came down to say, stop picking death, pick life. And the only way you could do that is to suffer with me in Bescha, to move from life to death. Okay, so that's a nutshell of why we should come to Bescha. We have to understand it's more than just singing and repeating. It's life. Life. So let me take a little bit of time to talk a little bit about the Bescha rite in general. I have talked about Ibn Kabar, right? It was the 14th century priest, lived around the 1300s. He was a Coptic priest, and he wrote that book, Misbah al-Zulma, okay? And he mentioned, he's the first one to mention something about Bescha. He said, about specifically Bescha, he said it was arranged by Pope Gabriel II Ibn Turiaq, which was the 12th century. So, Pope Gabriel II did something to Bescha. What did he do? He says that before Pope Gabriel, when you come to Bescha, you would read the entire Bible. For that 1 week, you read the entire Bible, beginning to end. Okay? That's a lot to read in 1 week. But that's what they would do. They would just spend the whole day and they would read the entire Bible. And Pope Gabriel said, we can't do this anymore. We're going to put some readings. Let's focus the readings on the Passion, about the Pascha. And that's where we get prophecies. He still kept the Old Testament and New Testament. Got some prophecies and you got some gospel readings. And even till this day, we still read some books in their entirety. But that's where it started from. Pope Gabriel said, we got to change things a little bit. He did it because a lot of cops were in the government jobs and they couldn't take the whole week off. So they shortened it. Instead of reading the whole gospel, 24 hours, the whole Bible, they shortened it. Then that's the 12th century. We get to the 14th century. It's 13th century. There's a bishop in Bahnasa. His name is Bishop Peter. He revised Pope Gabriel's format a little bit. He decided, rather than just randomly giving certain gospels and certain prophecies throughout the day, he made 5 different hours. Right? That's why we have 5 hours, the 1st, the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and 11th, right? You guys looking at me like I'm talking a different language. Yes? You go to church, right? On Bescha? I'm just checking. Okay? We have 5 hours in the morning, 5 hours in the evening, right? So that's what Pope Peter did. Bishop Peter Bahnasa, he decided to make them 5. And he also made them a little bit more standardized. So before that, for a while, they were reading a lot of the Old Testament, and some hours had no New Testament. And the other hours had only New Testament and nothing else. So they decided to keep the format same way that we're doing now. Old Testament, Psalm, New Testament, and commentary. Right? That's just the same we're doing now. That was the 13th century. Okay? The oldest manuscript... you have a question? Yeah.
Why is it first
It's just a system that was really used throughout the world, that you split the day into 3-hour groups. It- I know. So but that system of identifying the day into 3 groups,
Oh, I get it. Okay. Okay, so it's like AM, PM. I get it. Okay. So it's like the Exedia, but instead of being as a 24-hour period, 12 hours.
the way to put it. There's also some controversy going back to like Jewish traditions. When did the day start? Some people in the Jewish tradition said that the day starts in the evening. That's why they say the Sabbath is coming. It starts in the evening, right, of the prior day. So the day starts from PM to PM. Okay, and then there were other people who really said the first hour is morning, where the sun comes up. So there was like 2 systems being used interchanged. Okay, so we get to the 13th century. We have the idea of how that was rearranged. Now we get to the manuscripts. The oldest manuscript of the Bescha, manuscript being written down, is 1273 A.D. Okay, we have a date on it. So that's 13th century. Really, really close to when Emba Peter, Bishop of Hennessa, was alive. So this is really, really old. This is the one we have still in the library in Paris. Okay. And there's been a bunch of other manuscripts all the way up to the 19th century, 19th, 20th century. The monks or scribes would write it down. The oldest printed version, printed meaning it's published, not handwritten, it's written on a machine. Okay? The oldest one we have was 1873. So that's 19th century. It was done in Arabic only for the Coptic Catholic Church. They are the ones who made the first one in Arabic. The first Coptic version of the Igbeya printed was 1899. So we're a little later. Bescha book. Okay? So the first Coptic one was around 1899. When they did this version, there's some question as why they did this version, but they took a lot of stuff out. And the theory is the Coptic Church and the Catholic Church were fighting. The Coptic Catholic, so they didn't want anything to resemble the Coptic Catholic Church, even the book they used. Okay, so they took things out. I don't know. Yeah. So they made this Coptic version, and it had lots of things missing. It only came till 1921. The Coptic version added those missing things. Only some of them. Okay, 1921. We get to this version. This version kind of became popular from 1921 on, and this is the version you're going to see most of the current Arabic books follow. Okay, it's Bescha, and this is the version that follows the old California book, St. Mary, the LA book. If you've ever seen the old, we used to use it, probably before their time, right? You know what I'm talking about. So there's an old version that's English, Arabic, Coptic, that has certain number of readings, sermons, but not everything. Okay. Why is that? That follows the 1921 version. 1949, Metropolitan Athanasius of Beni Suef, he decided he's going to revise the book in 1949, so he added the stuff that was missing. And that's where we get the new version, which is now what you find in Coptic Reader, the Connecticut book, the Jersey book. Okay, there's got more stuff. So a lot of people ask, why is there more stuff? The PowerPoint, the New Jersey PowerPoints, they have the 1921 version. Coptic Reader has the 1949 version, and there's more stuff. And people say, why is there two things? just the way it developed over time, we have both of them now. Reading, no, readings. Readings. Before, almost all of the manuscripts are just readings. Maybe I'm switching which one Coptic Reader used. The Connecticut book and the longer one is from the 1921 version. Yeah. Exactly. So there's other stuff that kind of came in after that. Okay? Again, this is just knowledge, just to get you an idea that we've been doing this for at least the 13th century. We have evidence of that. We probably did it from way before that. And if we take what Ibn al-Qabr said, we've been doing something for Besra since the 12th century. Okay? But how exactly we do things developed over time until what we have now. And that's just, okay, again, just knowing this information doesn't help you with seeing God. It's just to get you to understand there's a long history, but ultimately what we want to do is see God. Okay? All right, so as Ehab was saying, I was going to talk a little bit about Amon Ganis. It's a wonderful hymn. It's a wonderful hymn. Does anybody know anything about it other than the tune? What does it actually say? You can pull it up on the screen. Yeah.
You guys know the structure of what we do.
So how many hours? 5 and 5. Okay? And each hour has the same format. Start out with the Old Testament reading or prophecy. We will then have a sermon, usually in the morning ones, not the night ones. Usually in the morning ones. A homily from one of the saints.
Like a sermon that's written down by the saints. Like we usually have
Yes. So we have the Old Testament prophecy. We have a written homily from one of our famous saints. We have the Psalm. We have the doxology. Then we have the Psalm. Then we have the Gospel and the commentary. Hours of Agbeya. Guess? Huh?
Something with that. Psalms do say the challenge. Most of the hours is 12. So we go to places. So you guys are not here. You're supposed to pray like day every day, all the hours of the day. So let's say monasteries or monks do this, so they pray the day all the hours of the day. In Mexico, they don't pray the day. One week a year. All the psalms are replaced. All the hours of the day are replaced. All the psalms that we read are no longer, the psalms of the day, but we read the psalms in the best way.
Okay. Yeah. There wasn't a particular topic. It was more just fighting.
What do we need to read?
No, not directed to Besra. No.
On different forms,
Mm.
but it's almost arbitrary what the topic actually is. So like the 1980s controversy is on Bible study. The Orthodox Church doesn't do Bible study. We don't study the Bible. We're an Orthodox Church. For a priest to stand in front of a congregation and pull out a Bible and read the Bible. Oh, he's Protestant. That's what Protestants do. Same thing with studying the Sister There was like this era where studying the same as Matthew 6:0. The Babeli. Like that guy, he studied the patristic fathers and, that's an Eastern Orthodox thing. That's not a Coptic or Oriental Orthodox thing. So we have to work through some of these issues that have really nothing to do with the issues challenge, but two faiths that really shouldn't be opposed to each other.
Yeah. It's just the way things just happens. And it repeats.
Yes, on a different topic.
Yeah. Okay. So, homogenes. The version we have here, translated from Arabic, it's missing stuff. And this is why I want to bring this out, because if you just rely on translation, you just rely on knowledge, you're missing something. You're missing things. And I'm going to give you the information, but that's still not the whole picture. That's just knowledge. Okay? So, I will tell you that this whole first part, from all monogenes all the way till the end of this part, that's 4 slides, is one run-on sentence. Okay? But the translation changes things around. Okay? So, as Eheb was saying before, the way the church taught you things was through your hymns. You want to know what we believe in? What does your hymn say? Okay? You want to know, are we Arian? Are we Arian? Do we believe in Arianism? No, we know that. But how do you know for sure? Because what we say is contradicting Arianism. What our hymns say contradicts Arianism. And this hymn, that's the beauty of it, is that it was very specific because it was teaching you who Christ is, not what people say wrong things about him. And so it starts out, it's going to give you lots of little tidbit informations in little group sections. Okay? So the subject of the whole part is the only begotten Son, homogenes. So that's the subject. Who are we talking about? The only begotten Son. Okay? And what is he? He is immortal Word of God. Okay? In the older language, he's the immortal Word of God. He exists immortally. Okay? He consented to our salvation. This is all things that he did. And he is incarnate from the Holy Theotokos, the ever Virgin Mary. Okay? So, who is he? He is the Logos, the second person of the Trinity. No arguing, he's God. What did he do? Or what is he actually? He exists immortally. He consented to our salvation. He was incarnate from the Virgin Mary without change. Being crucified, he's both God and Christ. Okay? Now this is important because there was heresies that said you can't be both man and God at the same time. So one of them is just housing the other one. Okay, that was another heresy. Okay? When you say he's God, he can't suffer. So he can't be man like you. The man part is just housing the God part. That's a heresy. He said, no. We believe he was crucified. Okay? It doesn't say his body was crucified. That's why I said the subject from the very beginning is the only begotten Word of God. Okay? Not his body, him. He was crucified and he's both God and Christ. Having trampled down death by death, being one from the Trinity, being glorified with the Father and with the Son, save us. So the whole thing was just to say, save us. Who is going to save us? The only begotten Son. Why? Because he did all this. He was incarnate. He did all this. He is glorified with the Father. He is man and he is God. And he came to earth to suffer to save us. Okay. Thank you for coming. Right on time.
Can I just
Sure.
handshake? Sure. Thank you.
It's all good. Okay. So, who are we talking about in the monogenes? The only begotten Son. You should be right away. This is just like your definition of your faith. Who are we talking about? The only begotten Son. What did he do? He consented to our salvation. He was incarnate of the Virgin Mary. He was crucified. And he's God and Christ. He's man and God. Okay? And he did all of this to save us. Yeah. Sorry. I can't multitask, apparently. Okay. So now we're going to talk. He's going to redirect our information on who Christ is and what he did, and he's going to add what we call the Trisagion, the thrice holy hymn, which is Agios or Theos, right? So he's going to add that, and then we're going to be specific qualifications. So we say, what's the next part? Who, being God for our sake, became man without change. Okay? And another translation, became man without change and remained God. Yeah. Who is that? Whoever wrote this hymn. We're not exactly sure who wrote it. There's theories that it was either St. Severus of Antioch, maybe St. Athanasius, and maybe Justinian, the Eastern Orthodox emperor. Okay? Yes. No, that's how it's pronounced in English. Welcome to America. Okay. So we don't know exactly who wrote it. We do know that it was probably Oriental Orthodox, because in the Coptic tradition and the Syrian tradition, we put the Trisagion and we add qualifications. That's very common for us. It's completely uncommon for the Eastern Orthodox. But they are certain that it was Justinian who wrote it, so there's no real clear-cut answer on it. Chanted in every church. Christmas. It's for the procession. This, because in the Eastern Orthodox Church, this hymn is for processions. So it's the same concept. No, it's not specifically said. This is more of like your definition of faith. So when you ordain the Pope, you're ordaining the person who's going to define the faith for us. Right. And the making of the Mairun. Right.
That's why it makes sense also for the making of the because it's all related to our faith, and the core of our faith is
Hinges. Yeah. What's your question? I don't think so. I think that, yeah, save us, which is all one sentence. Yeah. Okay. So, holy God, who became man without change and remained God. See, this is important because if you know certain religions and certain theories and certain heresies, they will never ever say God became man. It's impossible for God, a divine person, to be man. Why? Man dies. God can't die. So it's impossible for them to say God became man. But for us, we're saying, no. Straight up, there's no arguing. God became man. If he didn't become God, he didn't become man, we could never be saved. And that's why I was telling you before about the story of Adam. He didn't just say, game over, that's it, I'm done with mankind. No, he came down, became man, suffered to bring us from death to life. Okay? Holy, immortal. Where are we? Second one. Who by weakness showed forth what is greater than power. So here again, for someone to say God suffered is a sign that God is soft or weak. And for someone to say God suffered, that's a blasphemy. For us, though, when we say God was suffering, his suffering is actually more powerful than might or power itself. Okay? And that's what we're focusing on, because if you just come to think, I want to come to Bescha and feel the presence of God, and I want to feel better, well, you're not really focusing on the power God gave you. He came to give power to you by trampling death. He showed what is stronger than real power. Holy, immortal, who was crucified for us. No, I messed up. Yeah, who was crucified for us. A little different. For our sake and endured death in the flesh, the eternally immortal. This one I wanted to point out because, again, if you rely on the Arabic and the translation, you're missing. It actually says, holy, immortal, who was crucified for us. Okay, so far so good. Who through the cross endured death in the flesh and displayed that you died, but you really exist immortally. A lot different than what it says here. Okay, you have to focus on the words here. And it's a declaration of our faith. Who displayed that you died. Again, there's lots of churches that say God can't die. And for us to say that God died, there's another heresy. So we're saying, well, God died, kind of think of it, he was temporarily dead for 3 days. Okay? But reality, he's a resurrected Christ. He exists immortally. So this is our faith, that even in the Bescha, we're thinking of the resurrection. Notice that? You notice in the Gospel, in Gethsemane, when Christ is praying, he says, Father, glorify your Son, for the hour has come. He says it when he's suffering. Most people think when he's glorified, that's his resurrection, when he was resurrected from the body. But Christ is telling us his suffering is glory because he exists as God. I know it's complicated, but it's very important. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that includes Mina. You have to.
That always makes me stand for that one.
That's all he remembers.
You're talking about spirituality.
I know.
You're talking about sitting and standing.
No, we're talking proclamation of faith, 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's about the length of, you think about your standard sitcom is 30 minutes, they got commercials part of 12 minutes, that's the long length of sitcom, about that long. Your throne, O God, is forever. What's God's throne? The cross. So isn't it amazing that like the glory of the king is on his throne? That's what is glorified. And the throne isn't the seat in the chair. His throne is the cross. The cross. That's why this is so important. I mean, everything that Jesus is saying is about how important it is for us to understand this role that Christ played in our salvation and our redemption. And how many people try to take away from that? Every single verse we hear, every phrase is added for reason. But along the way, one guy said, Christ was in action God. He was just the images of God. So he didn't actually become a man. He was just
How's the divinity?
the housing of the divinity. So all these things are important. We have to not think that because we will have to face like this in our premise field here of Christ. There's also this understanding of
Unless you go to Holy Cross. You're right. So he looked up the word death in the dictionary. It says the total cessation of function in what? Okay, total and permanent cessation of all vital functions of an organism, right? So if we apply that to God, are we not saying God ceased to exist? That's the definition of death. The total and permanent cessation. Did God permanently stop being God? Then we can't use the word death. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's another heresy. Correct. It's both. It's both. It's both because that's what the hymn is trying to put focus here. He said, "Who became man without change and remained God." So the fact that he becomes man doesn't make him stop being God, and the fact that his body dies doesn't make him stop being God. Even when he's in death, doesn't make him stop being God, because his body dies, or the words that we kind of use is. He was found, he displayed that you were in a temporary state of death. I'm expanding the words here a little bit so you understand. It says he died. But think of it as, for 3 days, this body stopped and died in the way we understand death as man. But as God, he didn't die. So you have to make the distinction, but also not separate them. That's why this hymn is important. And this is what people got themselves into trouble. They would either ignore the distinction, or they insisted on the distinction that God is not man. Yeah. Right. So God can't die. So you're correct. And the death is in his flesh. But don't get stuck into this idea that there's a flesh of God and there's the divinity of God, and we're starting to separate it. That's why the other parts of the hymn say, no. Remain the God. Stays the same. Okay? Yeah. It's a good question. There's a spiritual death, so you stop trying to see God. Okay. Yeah, we can't say he died. He follows all of those. He follows all the things that we consider death. And you're right. He went down to Hades, and his soul was separate. Okay, that is all true. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because you run into the danger of saying the divinity died. The way we understand death. It's complicated. But you have to think about it, because if we just go by the notes and the tune, and we're not really focusing on the Spirit, what are we trying to say to God with this hymn? What are we trying to declare? We're missing half of the whole point of Bescha. And I think this hymn really kind of focuses on step back, listen, this is your faith, research it, understand it. And this will make you pass from life to death. It's that whole process. Okay, yeah. From the Greek. From the Greek, yeah. And I had to kind of explain a little bit. So, any other questions? Sorry it took so long. Yeah, I know you're really tired. Showed up like the last 5 minutes there. Thank you. Name of us. What? Oh, the definition of Bescha. It is.
Oh, I know what it is.
Yeah.
It is
Union with God.
that transforms mankind from death life to death.
Wow, they were paying attention. I love it. Thank you.
Guys, so now we're done for the evening. It's free time. Sort of take advantage of it. It's fellowship with each other. If you guys want to, whatever.